Hi, and welcome to another video by Jim the Car Guy. Today we have a 2005 Mercury Mountaineer, which is just like the Ford Explorer, and we're going to be replacing the front brake pads, the rotors, and the hardware kit. I'll bring you in there. I'm going to show you why we're replacing them, because the brake pedal pulsates like crazy, and the rotor itself, the rust lip on there is significant, so they're not even machinable, so we are going to be replacing the rotors. Like I said, we're going to change the brake pads, the brake rotors. Very important is we're going to change the brake hardware kit, and we're going to make sure our slide pins slide properly so that we don't have any problems with this job. So let me bring you up. I'm going to show you what kind of tools you're going to need, and then we're going to get started. So let's take a walk up front. Okay, this is an example of what you're going to need to be replacing when you do the brakes. Obviously, we have a new rotor. We're going to clean this off with some brake cleaner because, as you can see, it's got that oily residue on the back of the rotor. We're going to change our brake pads, and we're going to change our brake hardware kit because the brake pads on the left front were actually staying applied. The right front we'll have to check and see as we go along. We're going to need a disc such as this to clean up the hub because the hub was very rusty. A screwdriver to pry off the hardware kit. File or sandpaper or emery cloth, razor blade, whatever you have to clean rust off because the rust on the hub has got to come off of there. A small pry bar such as this to pry the pistons back in to the bore, and we're going to use you can use one ratchet. Obviously I'm using two of them. You can see that this one here is a 14 millimeter. That's the caliper mounting bolts, and this is either a 17 or an 18 millimeter, and that's the mounting bracket bolts. We're going to use some synthetic brake grease to lubricate everything, and of course we're going to hang our caliper off to the side so we don't leave it dangling and cause any kind of a problem. Alright, so what we're going to do first is we're going to come in over here. We're going to put our pry bar in this way here, and we're going to push these pistons here all the way back into the bore as far as they can go, and then we're going to make sure our slide pins here and here slide back and forth and they don't stay applied. Very important to make sure your slide pins are sliding the way they're supposed to. So, all right, let's get set up and let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here with our pry bar like this, and we're just going to keep slow, constant pressure on it to push that piston back into the bore. You don't have to really use a lot of pressure. You're just going to use a little bit. And then once it slides in a little bit, you just push it back and forth, and you wedge your pry bar in here. I'll bring you in here, I'll show you what I'm doing. Let's get a light here so you can see. See, what we're doing is you're actually putting your pry bar right inside the piston right there, and then we'll pry it back in. Let's see if I can do that while you're watching here. So if you just keep constant pressure on it, you'll see that that piston pushes back into the bore. And we'll do the same thing over here. This is a two-piston setup, so we'll just do the same thing here as well. And now, as you can see, the pistons are pushed back in as far as they can go. They don't have to be recessed at a later date. Now, if you didn't push them in far enough, I'll show you a tool that we use to push them back in the rest of the way. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to take off this bolt here and this bolt here. We're going to relocate this caliper off to the side, and then we're going to remove that mounting bracket. So, all right, let's continue. Okay, so now we're going to take out and loosen these, just like that. We're going to take these two out. Now, I might add, you're going to check these slide pins here to make sure that they slide properly. You can either do it now, or you could do it later on when you have the mounting bracket off the car. But the way you test it is just slide it back and forth. If it slides back and forth, which it does, then we know that these slide pins here are okay. They do slide pretty tightly, so we are going to lubricate everything before we put it back together. And then we'll take out both of the bolts that we just broke loose. locate this off to the side like this. You never want to have the caliper hanging by the ABS wire or the brake hose if you don't have ABS. You always want to make sure you support it with something like this. It's a hook like this that you can buy, or you can just use a piece of wire that I've been using these just about forever. You can see they're pretty beat up and they work fine for years. Right. The next thing we're going to do now is we're going to take off the 2 bolts in the back over here that hold this mounting bracket on. And as you can see, these slide pins do slide nice and freely. The brake pads are actually rusted into the mounting bracket right here, but we're going to clean that up later on. All right, so now we're going to take out these bolts underneath here. You want to loosen both of the bolts before you take the one out. Take this off, and now we're going to take our brake pads out. You can see that they're pretty tight in there actually. We're going to bring this over and clean this up later, but right now we just tap the pads out. And these are actually trash, of course. And we're going to take these off right here. You just pull this out like this, pull this one out like that as well, and then we just throw these away. Now what I was telling you is that you see underneath here, you see that rust that's inside there? There's very little rust in here, but we're going to clean this up anyway on the wire wheel just to make sure that we have a clean surface here and here. Every place that the brake pad is going to touch, we're going to make sure we clean it up. Now, if you don't have a wire wheel, you can take a file such as this and just come in here like this and just clean it up just like that to clean this surface up right in here. All right? Very important is that that surface is clean before you put the new hardware back on. So we're going to come back to this in just a minute. And our rotor just comes right off the vehicle. I just want to show you what I'm telling you about this rust in here. You can see how rusted this is back in here. This rust is very important that all of this rust comes off in here. So we are going to clean this up really well. Like I said, you could use a disc such as this to clean it up, or a piece of sandpaper or emery, whatever you have, but it's important that you clean this up. So let me clean this up, and I'm going to clean up this mounting bracket here as well, and then we'll come right back. Take our rotor like this. We're going to spray it with some brake cleaner, and then we're just going to clean up that grease that comes on it, or oil, whatever you want to call it. Same thing on the other side. And we just put our new rotor back on here. Now, you're probably wondering what this lug nut, or this big nut, is all about. I put the nut on here like this, and I screw a bolt or a wheel nut onto it like this, push it in here, and then the rotor is stationary and it's not going to move, and you won't have to fumble around trying to get the mounting bracket on with the brake pads and everything else. Alright, so now we've cleaned up the area where the hardware is going to go. We're going to put a slight bead of grease wherever the mounting hardware is going to go. Just like that. And then we'll take our new hardware. And there's only one way it can go on. It goes on just like this. And then you take it and you push this part. I'll show you. You see this piece right here? This is the part that you're going to push in first. You push it in right here, like that. And you just make sure that it clips on just like this on both sides. Make sure that that clip right there, this clip, is down all the way and not going to interfere with your rotor. And then we'll take the same one here, put it over the top like this, put it in, push it. Just like that. Again, push that in so it's down all the way. As you can see, that's the way it is, just like that. Okay. Now we're going to take the synthetic grease again, put a little bit on here like this, on both sides, like that. Any place that the brake pad is going to touch, you put a little bit of synthetic grease, just like that. Okay? And now the slide pins, you're going to take these slide pins out, but you're going to do one at a time, because sometimes these are different. And you're going to take some brake cleaner and put it on the rag and clean off the slide pin. Then you put a little bit of the grease back on here like this. And you make sure it goes back in to the same location. You want to make sure that that boot right there pops up where it belongs, up on top. You'll see it pop in there, just like that. And now we're going to do the same thing on this one. Now you see the difference? This one has the rubber on it. Alright, so we're going to clean off that grease that's on there, like that. And now you're just going to put a little bit of silicone on here. You're not going to put any silicone on this end over here, just a little bit on the rubber and above, not below. Because if you put it below here and you push this into the bore, it's going to wind up with air pressure pushing it back. So we're just going to take it, turn it, and rotate it in. And again, make sure that that boot pops back up on top. Just like that. Alright. Now, the brake pads, we're going to take the brake pad, put it in here like this. And these pieces here, you have to push these in slightly to get the brake pad in. But I'll give you an idea like this. Just like that. And then we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Now you can put this on now, or you could put these on later. It doesn't really matter. Whatever is easier for you. If you want to put it in the vehicle and put it back on, you can also do that. But that is what it's supposed to look like, just like this. And now we're going to put it back onto the vehicle. Now obviously it's going to go this way, and we're going to put it over the top like this. And then you squeeze your brake pads together. And then both of the longer bolts, you're going to catch them by hand first. See what happens if you would tighten up one bolt and not the other, you may have the hole off slightly. Right now that we have them both caught, we're just going to make sure our brake pads stay pushed in, and then we'll tighten these bolts up. Okay, now there is torque specs on these two bolts right here, but I'm going to look it up and I'm going to come back to that point later on. But we do need to torque these bolts back into the mounting bracket, so we will come back to that. All right, so now we're going to take the caliper and we're going to put our caliper back on. You grab, take it off here, And a little bit of silicone. Like I said, every place that that brake pad is going to touch, we're just going to put a little bit of silicone on there. On each one of the locations where the brake pad touches. Now we're going to take it, put it over the top, like this. And you need to push these slide pins back in so you can get the caliper over the top of it, just like that. And then we catch both of the bolts. Remember, you catch them both before you tighten up the bolts. You want to make sure they're both caught. Now let me just point this out to you here as well. Let me bring it out and show you this. That's not going to happen, yes. Okay, let's do it this way. Okay, that'll probably do it. Okay. Now you see this here slide pin right here? You see how it's flat on the one side right there? Make sure that that flat part goes back in there just like that, so it's actually lined up. I don't know if you can see this one here, but let's get a light in there. You see how that flat part sits up against that bracket? Okay. This piece here needs to fit in there just like that. Has to be against there like that. It will go the other way, turn sideways, but you're going to have trouble getting that bolt in there. So be careful, make sure it's in all the way, and then screw these down. All right, now we're going to tighten them up. Okay. Now we can take our nut back off here. Okay, now we're going to talk about what we did here. Okay. Now we made sure that underneath this rotor here, this hub, we made sure that all of that rust was off of there. Very, very important. Even a little bit of rust on there is going to cause this rotor to pulsate, and you're going to have that steering wheel wobble. All right, so make sure that that's clean. We cleaned the face of the rotor up with some brake cleaner to get all that oily substance off there. We cleaned up our mounting bracket here where the hardware goes, so we made sure it's nice and clean inside there. We lubricated our slide pins, made sure that they slide properly. We installed our new hardware kit and lubricated every place that the brake pad is going to touch. Let's get some light in here. Okay. We lubricated every place that the brake pad is going to touch. You can see we use that synthetic grease in there. We lubricated every contact point that touches the brake pad, as well as on the pistons in the back over here and here. We made sure we tightened up the, well, we're going to come back and we're going to torque these bolts up in here on the mounting bracket here and down on the bottom there. We put our new caliper, we put the caliper back on, not the new caliper, we put our caliper back on, tightened up the two bolts here and here, and we made sure that our line and ABS sensor is not twisted in a circle or whatever. It needs to be perfectly straight, such as this. All right, and that's it. We're all set. Okay, so now obviously I told you I did the other side already. The left side is already done. Right side is finished. Now we're going to put the wheels back on. Before we take it for a road test, we're going to get in the vehicle, we're going to step on the brake pedal and pump it up 3 or 4 times until we get that piston to push back out on the calipers and come in contact with the new brake pads, which then are going to come in contact with the rotor. So it's very important that you pump that pedal up before you drive it. When you first get in the vehicle and step on it, your foot's going to go to the floor for probably 3 or 4 times, and then you'll feel the pedal come right up on top. And that's it, you're all done. Road test it, make sure you have no shimmy in there. And it is normal that you're going to get a little bit of smoke or a little bit of burning smell, because that grease is actually inside the ribs of the rotor and you can't clean that out. So if you have a little smoke or a little bit of a burning smell, Perfectly normal, nothing to worry about. But that's it. This job is done, and it's on to the next one. All right, as always, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.